Hello comrades, it's the Finnish Bolshevik. To be honest, I did not expect another coup in Venezuela. The US already tried a military coup against Chavez, so I didn't think it was likely that they would try to do the same thing again. Well, I guess it is slightly different. The Bolivarian administration has been able to stay in power for two reasons. It has the support of the people, and it has the loyalty of the military. So after the failed military coup in the early 2000s, they managed to get rid of treacherous elements in the military and secure that the military is loyal to the government. So that's why this coup that the US is now pushing is kind of a coup d'etat light, if you will. It's not a military coup. It's something else. So basically what has happened is that Nicolas Maduro, the socialist candidate, won the elections. Now the US and the Venezuelan right wing are not happy with this, obviously. Maduro's election victory was pretty much a given. Most of the opposition actually boycotted the presidential elections. They didn't think they were gonna win, so they decided to boycott, so that they could then claim that the elections were rigged. But that plan kinda fell apart because only some of them boycotted and some of them didn't boycott. Anyway, the right wing didn't win. They never had enough support to realistically win elections, so that's why they have chosen other tactics. Other tactics include, obviously, the economic sanctions against Venezuela, economic warfare against Venezuela. Before this, it was mostly, basically, just sabotage and outright terrorism that they were doing against Venezuela. You had the failed assassination attempt against Maduro when they tried to fly an explosive drone towards him. Last year, the US was obviously feeding lots and lots of money to the Venezuelan opposition and supporting these violent armed riots where they would shoot leftist activists and they would try to set hospitals on fire and they would try to set factories and things on fire. After the Venezuelan Supreme Court sided with Maduro and supported his reform of the parliament, the right-wing terrorists actually bombed the Venezuelan Supreme Court building, or at least they tried to. So I was expecting that they would continue this trend of just like basically violent terrorism, bomb attacks, and continuing the sanctions and whatnot, but turns out that they tried something else, so they have kind of adopted a hybrid strategy because it's not quite a military coup, but they also knew that they wouldn't win elections, so it's kind of a hybrid coup. Basically, the opposition frontman or leader, Juan Guaido, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's the opposition mouthpiece, the opposition frontman, and he basically just proclaims himself president. Which is technically treason, I suppose. Technically that is a coup, if you just say, I didn't win elections, but I proclaim myself the president, and now the military should put me in power. Well, the military didn't put him in power, so it failed. There were more anti-government protests by the right-wingers, but basically what has now happened is that various other countries, obviously the US, Colombia, various Western imperialist powers and right-wing puppet states of those imperialist powers have now said that they recognize Guaido as the Venezuelan president, even though he didn't win elections. So they are trying to support this coup, and they say that they don't recognize Maduro as the president, even though he did win elections. So once again, the West is meddling in South America, trying to overthrow democratically elected presidents. Same old story. It is very serious though, because the opposition candidate is trying to get the military to support him. If the military would support him, then this might work. But even that's not a given, because the last time when they actually had a full-on military coup, the Venezuelan masses were still able to prevent it and rescue President Chavez when they tried to coup him.
Chávez. Chávez es el presidente de Venezuela y el pueblo lo ama y lo vamos a defender.
Fuerza Armada, el 98% de la Fuerza Armada en todo el país ha reafirmado, ha reiterado su lealtad a la Constitución vigente en Venezuela, a la Constitución de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.
Roared on by huge crowds, the presidential guard who had gone into hiding retook the palace, and the plotters fled.
Some interesting features about this is that the ruling class is not entirely united on this. And you also see a fair amount of liberals who don't support this coup, which is pretty strange. Typically the liberals have always supported American wars and American interventions, and then only complained afterwards. At least the mainstream liberals have always championed those when they were going on. If you look at Fox News, the conservative media in the US, of course they support the coup. The mainstream liberal CNN supports the coup. But some others, such as The Guardian in the UK, which is considered a liberal publication, is a bit skeptical of this coup. They don't really support it, which is interesting. It seems to be because basically there is this power struggle in the ruling class. Some are pro-Trump and some are against Trump. The Guardian is painting this as not a coup of US imperialism, but Trump's coup. Oh, look, Trump is doing this. Well, no, this is really the same thing that American capitalism and American imperialism has always done. This is not something specific to Trump. But the more left-leaning liberals who are not in the mainstream, the Young Turks, Kyle Kulinski, and Jimmy Dore especially, seem to be against the coup, which is very good. Liberals need to finally wake up and understand that this is what capitalism is. This is what global superpower capitalism, also known as imperialism, is. They want to go in there because Venezuela has oil and a bunch of other things, and the US doesn't like independent countries in South America. It likes puppet states. This is not because the US is just evil randomly or something. No, the US isn't randomly evil. The US is just the leading capitalist power. They're going in there for the resources, for the profits, for the profit motive. This is inevitably what is going to happen in a profit-driven, money-driven system. The profit motive is entirely antithetical to democracy, as has been demonstrated time and time again. Okay, now let's talk about Maduro's strategy. So, immediately when this coup began, Jason Unruhe, as expected, made a video about it because he always puts out news about current things. And he was very critical of Maduro, saying how Maduro should just implement full-on working-class control, working-class power, or as we Marxists call it, the proletarian dictatorship. Not dictatorship in the sense that it's an undemocratic one-man tyranny or something, but a proletarian dictatorship in the sense that the proletarian class, the working class, has power. They are the ones with the power. Because right now, Venezuela has two powers. There's the capitalist power and there's the working class power. So Jason was saying, why doesn't Maduro just implement full-on working-class power? Why doesn't he strip the capitalist class of their power already? Because they are always trying to do stuff like this. The capitalists don't care about democracy, so why should we be so nice to them, basically? If they don't care about democracy, they're constantly trying to coup the government. Why shouldn't we suppress them politically? From a legal standpoint, that would kind of make sense, because the opposition... I've always said that the opposition is not legitimate because they are not a real opposition. They're merely a US puppet. They're a foreign agent. They are a foreign actor. The opposition wouldn't even exist if the US didn't give them so much money. That is their lifeline, is the money they get from the US. So they're not a native opposition. They're a foreign puppet. And the people who are now doing the coup are clearly guilty of treason. So from legal standpoint, it would make sense to just put them away and to repress them. So why doesn't Maduro do that? I don't think Maduro is like such a pacifist or something that he's just committed to a totally reformist, legal and peaceful solution to everything. He may be, but I don't think that's the real reason. I think the real reason is a tactical one. I think Maduro, in all the things he does, doesn't want to give the US any kind of excuse to intervene more than they already do. I think that is the real reason why Maduro has tolerated the opposition's terrorism for as long as he has. The US has put sanctions on Venezuela because the US actually claims that Venezuela is a threat to the US, to US security. I'm not joking. The US has said that Venezuela is a threat to American security, which is laughable. Absolutely laughable. So the US has sanctions on Venezuela. If Maduro was to stamp out all the terrorist elements and all the opposition puppets of the US, then the US would say, oh look, Maduro is a dictator, now we can go in. And it would be a much more convincing case than it is now. if Maduro now goes and just arrests the opposition leader and cracks down, the US might take that as a convenient excuse to invade. It kind of seems that they're trying to build towards that right now, because they're trying to get all these other governments to recognize the opposition. They're trying to build some kind of international capitalist coalition to give themselves more legitimacy so that they could then intervene militarily, possibly do what they did to Libya, like they bombed Libya to absolute ruin, and then they said, oh, it wasn't the US doing it, it was an international coalition. Well, what does that mean? The US and its allies, basically. So I think Maduro has calculated that this coup is not going to succeed because the military supports Maduro and the people support Maduro, so... And then it's just going to eventually die down. Maduro is going to continue in power. That is probably his calculation. He's just trying to keep his cool, keep calm, not overreact and lash out against the opposition, because that would be then used as an excuse to invade Venezuela. That is my speculation about what is happening and why Maduro is doing what he's doing.